My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 28 years old. And 3 weeks ago, my parents sat in the front row of a lawyer's office, smiling like they had already spent the money. My dad had been talking about buying a lake house. My mom wore a brand new coat, the kind you don't wear for comfort, only for appearances. They were ready. They just didn't know what my grandfather had written in that envelope. Nobody in that room did. The lawyer read the first part like it was routine: assets, property, legal language. Then he stopped, looked up and said very calmly, "This next section is to be read only if there is a strong reaction." The room went completely still. And in that moment, I knew my grandfather hadn't just written a will, he had planned this. But to understand why, you need to go back to where all of this really started. I grew up in a small town called Brookfield, Pennsylvania. Population barely 5,000. One main street, one diner, one traffic light that took forever to change. And for over 40 years, my grandfather, Thomas Morgan, ran a hardware and supply store right in the center of it. Morgan Supply. Everyone knew it. If something broke in your house, chances were it had parts from his store in it. He built that place from nothing. One truck, one loan, and a reputation for never cutting corners. When I was a kid, my parents were always busy. Work, social events, trips. So I spent most weekends at my grandfather's house. At the time, I thought it was just convenient. Later, I realized it was something else. He made time. Every Saturday morning, we'd sit on his back porch with coffee, hot chocolate for me, and he'd tell stories about building the business, about my grandmother, about mistakes he made. And one thing he said stuck with me. Character is what you do when there's nothing to gain. When I turned 21, I moved to Pittsburgh. New job, new life. But I never stopped going back. Every Sunday, 2 hours there, 2 hours back. Sometimes just for lunch, sometimes to fix things around the house, sometimes just to sit with him. He never asked me to come. He just expected it in the quiet way people do when it matters. My parents, at first they had excuses. Then they had reasons. Then they just had silence. Months would go by, no calls, no visits, nothing. One afternoon, sitting on the porch, my grandfather said quietly, "I used to think they were busy. Now I think they just chose not to come." I didn't know how to respond, so I stayed. A few years later, everything changed. My parents made a decision, without asking me, without even telling me at first. They moved him into an assisted living facility, the cheapest one they could find. I found out from a neighbor. I drove there that same day. The place smelled like disinfectant and something underneath it. The kind of place that tries to feel clean but never quite does. His room was small, too small. He was sitting by the window when I walked in, and when he saw me, he smiled, like he had been waiting. "You found me," he said, like he wasn't sure I would. After that, I started going even more, weekends, some weekdays. I brought books, read to him when his eyesight got worse, brought homemade pie, my grandmother's recipe. We watched old movies, talked about everything and nothing. He started keeping a notebook. I noticed it, but I didn't ask. My parents visited once, took a photo, posted it online with the caption, "Family First." They stayed less than 20 minutes. 14 of those minutes, my mom was on her phone. He didn't say anything, but later that day he didn't want to talk. 6 months before he passed, he said something to me. We were sitting in the common room, TV on, nobody watching it. "Rachel," he said, "when the time comes, don't argue, just listen." I didn't understand then. I nodded anyway. And now we're back in that room, the lawyer's office. My parents sitting across from me. Confident, relaxed, certain. The lawyer turns the page and starts reading. "The property located at 18 Willow Lane is to be transferred in full to my granddaughter, Rachel Morgan." Silence. My dad blinks. "I'm sorry, what?" The lawyer continues. "All financial accounts, investments, and remaining assets are to be transferred to Rachel Morgan." My mom stands up. "That's not correct." "There is no error," the lawyer says. "My dad is on his feet now. That's my father. It was his decision." And then it starts. Voices raised. 3 months after the will reading, I thought everything had settled. Legally, it had. Emotionally, not even close. Because inheritance doesn't end when the papers are signed. That's when it actually begins. The first sign that it wasn't over, Tuesday morning. I was in the kitchen, barefoot, coffee in hand, still getting used to the quiet of the house. The kind of quiet that feels peaceful during the day and heavy at night. There was a knock on the door. Not a casual knock. 3 sharp hits. Deliberate. I knew who it was before I even opened it. My father never knocked softly. He looked different. Not older. Not weaker. Just smaller. Like something had been taken out of him. My mom stood a few steps behind him, arms crossed, face set in that familiar expression, controlled, rehearsed. "Can we come in?" he asked. No apology. No explanation. Just a request that sounded more like a statement. I stepped aside, old habits. They walked in like they still belonged there. My mom's eyes scanned the room immediately. The furniture, the walls, the small changes I had made. Measuring. Evaluating. Judging. We sat in the living room, the same one where my grandfather used to sit every evening. My father didn't look at me at first. He looked at the floor, then at his hands. Then finally, "At least you could have called," he said. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was familiar. The reversal, the rewriting of history. "I didn't think you wanted to hear from me," I said. My mom leaned forward instantly. "That's not true." It was, and we all knew it. "We didn't come here to argue," my father said quickly. "We came to talk about what's fair." There it was. Not "how are you?" Not "we're sorry." Fair. My chest tightened but my voice stayed steady. "What does fair look like to you?" He exhaled like he had been waiting for that question. "A split," he said. 50-50. I nodded slowly. "Between who?" His jaw tightened. "Don't do that." My mom jumped in. "You got everything, Rachel. Everything. That's not right." I looked around the room. At the walls my grandfather had painted himself. At the chair he used to sit in. At the space they hadn't been in for years. "He decided what was right," I said quietly. Silence. Then my father leaned forward, and for the first time there was something real in his voice. Not anger. Not entitlement. Something else. "You don't understand what he did to me." That caught me off guard. I waited. He swallowed. "He shut me out," he said. "Nothing I did was ever good enough." I stared at him. Because for a second, just a second, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not a villain, not even just a father who failed, but a man who had been carrying something long before I was old enough to notice. "He gave me everything," my father continued, "then took it all away when I didn't become what he wanted." I thought about the letter, about what my grandfather had said, about what he hadn't. "He didn't take anything away," I said carefully. "He stopped giving." That landed harder than I expected. My father leaned back like he'd been pushed. My mom stood up. "This is pointless," she snapped. "You've already made up your mind." She grabbed her purse, same motion, same precision, like that day in the lawyer's office, but my father didn't move. He stayed sitting, looking at the floor again. "You really think you deserved it?" he asked quietly. That question, that was the one that mattered. I took a breath. A real one. The kind my grandfather used to tell me to take before answering anything important. "I don't think it was about deserving," I said. He looked up. Confused. "I think it was about showing up." Silence. "You think I didn't show up?" he said. His voice wasn't loud. But it wasn't calm either. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list everything. I didn't need to. "You tell me," I said. That was the moment everything shifted. Because there was no one else in the room to perform for. No audience. No image to protect. Just the truth. And the space between us. My mom was already at the door. "Greg," she said sharply. "Let's go." He stood slowly. Looked at me. Really looked this time. Not as a daughter. Not as an obstacle. As something else. "This isn't over," he said. But it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like someone trying to convince himself. They left. Again. I stood in the living room for a long time after that. The house felt different. Not heavier. Clearer. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I went into my grandfather's study, sat at his desk, opened the notebook again. I don't know why. Maybe I was looking for something. Maybe I just needed to feel anchored. I flipped through the pages, stopped on one I hadn't noticed before. A small note in the margin. Different handwriting, more rushed. "Greg called today." I froze. No date, just that one line, and underneath it, he didn't say much, but he called. I sat there for a long time, reading that line over and over because it changed something. Not everything, but something. The story I had been telling myself was complete, clean, clear. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the whole story. I closed the notebook, leaned back in the chair, and for the first time since all of this started, I didn't feel like I had to choose between anger and forgiveness. Maybe there was something in between. My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 28 years old. And I'm starting to understand that inheritance isn't just what you receive, it's what you decide to do with the truth after.